What's up, everybody? Welcome back to ALLSMITH, where we explore resilience and purpose. Today, I'm honored to host Jamie Miller, a former MMA fighter turned advocate and spokesperson. Jamie's journey from homelessness to thriving alongside her daughter is a testament to grit, perseverance, and finding purpose through adversity. Let's dive into her powerful story and the lessons she's learned. Jamie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Really excited to unpack your story and share it with our listeners today. But before we dive in, you said you're getting ready to open a gym. That's not only brave and courageous, but there's a little bit of risk tolerance and fear associated with that. What brought on that kind of floating to the surface and coming to life for you?
Wow. So it's something I've been thinking about doing for quite a few years. I am somebody who I'm a risk taker, but I'm also like I guess within my comfort zone, right? So I'll get in a cage and fight somebody. I'll take that risk, but it's hard for me. I found that once I retired, it was really hard for me, like after losing my identity and not really seeing a clear path for myself and just kind of assuming that, okay, well, the next step should be opening a gym. But then I kind of like gave resistance to that because I was like still not 100% sure on it. And then kind of went off the beaten path a little bit and then realized, it kind of brought me back home to like my original idea to open a gym. So I think I kind of needed to go on that journey to realize this is my purpose and where I need to be. And, finally just listening to my intuition, listening to that small voice that's, been nudging me all these years. And finally, I have a lot of great supporting people in my life. People who are successful, who have their own gyms. Obviously my coach, who's also a great mentor of mine. I'm also just very hard-headed that it's like, I just, and I think it could have been too about getting like too many opinions, different opinions, And then finally there was one person who I knew I needed to talk to because he's like a big risk taker. And I knew he would just be like, what do you, like, why are you doing, like, he's the person who I needed that that one last shove to like kind of help me. I don't know. I don't know what it was exactly, but yes, had that conversation. He kind of like nudged me off the cliff, and I'm just like learning as I'm learning to fly on my way down, I guess you could say. Yeah.
You have confidence that the wings are going to appear upon you taking the leap. And what's beautiful about this is that you've been through a lot. Something that comes to mind is one day your story is going to be other people's survival guide. And even though risk is difficult, uncertainty management is difficult, you have proof of concept when you look in the rearview mirror at your past historical track record that when you have taken the leap or when you have done a little bit of a disruptive move in your life, you've always figured it out. And that's one of the beauties of you and your story. And I'm excited to peel back the layers on that today, because something that I've been thinking about in relation to your story this morning is sometimes hitting rock bottom is the foundation you need to build something unbreakable. When I say that quote, what comes to mind for you?
Man, can you read the words to me one more time?
Sometimes hitting rock bottom is the foundation you need to build something unbreakable.
Yeah. I think for me, in like relation to my story and all the things that I've gone through, hitting that rock bottom, like being homeless, escaping my abusive relationship as a single mother, for me, it was an opportunity to rebuild a stronger foundation, like on my own terms, and how I wanted to see my life going forward. Like for me, yes, I hit rock bottom, but it was also an opportunity for me to have this second chance at life and to do it my way. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I always love the line "my way." It makes me think of Frank Sinatra, and so many of us, like, we surrender to somebody else's plan, or we work for somebody else, or we do things that feel safe, but it ends up being the land of comfortable complacency, where it's like we're kind of secure, we're sort of happy-ish, but then there's all these other things that we don't really love or appreciate, and we see a better life for ourselves, but we also have the fear of like what could go wrong. And then it takes like some sort of disruptive explosion for us to be like, fuck this, I'm taking the leap, I'm not putting up with this anymore. You briefly mentioned the challenging and traumatic relationship that you were in. What was the final straw for you? Like, what was the moment where you're like, I'm not doing this anymore, I'm going to create a better life for me and my daughter?
Sure. So there was definitely a sequence of events that had led up to that. I had known for quite a while, especially as my daughter was getting older. She was 4 at the time, but she was obviously very aware of the things that were happening, obviously, and then feeling the heaviness and stress of it all as well. And I realized how it was affecting her, that I didn't want to bring her up in that environment anymore, just an unhealthy, toxic environment. And then for myself as well, I always knew I had something more inside me, and I was just like living this life I knew I didn't want to live in anymore. I just didn't know how to get out of it. I wasn't aware of resources. I didn't know about safety planning and the ways to get out of an abusive relationship safely. And so for me, when the decision came, it was just more of a reaction to the situation I was in, and it kind of just all happened the way that it did. But it just, I guess, to give you more of a general, like, his mental health was rapidly declining. He, was doing a lot of drugs that I was unaware of at the time, and also just like steroids. And he was also, at the time, undiagnosed with schizophrenia and psychosis, also things we were unaware of. So just like a mix of all these things, and I'm seeing it like unfold before my eyes. I couldn't really put a label on it. I just knew it was getting worse every day, and I was more terrified every day, and just never knowing any little thing could trigger him. And I don't know, I just got to the point where it's like I can't do this anymore. And it ended up that I got a train ticket, because my family all lives in Ohio. So that also made it very difficult when it came kind of like time to make that decision, because, we don't have that support, right? To just, go to mom's house or go to my sister's house. And so the way that it happened was he was actually away working on a trip to New York. And then the following week we were going to Ohio to his best friend's wedding. And while he was gone, he just had like created, like an argument out of something. And something in me was really calm. I didn't really know. I just didn't have the energy for it anymore. So basically I was just kind of not giving him the response as I normally would, which is, apologize profusely, like, even though it wasn't my fault, I didn't have the energy for it anymore. And it actually made him angrier, but I also felt safe enough to just kind of really give him that honest response, because he was, in New York, we were here. And so I remember made the call to my mom and just told her what had been happening. And like that whole year was probably the worst year we'd ever had. And she just had suggested that we leave early for the trip, figure it out, go to the wedding, and then figure it out when we get home, and like just do things properly, so that, my daughter could have, the best, try to give her, the healthiest way, like, to go about doing this, so that she's, supported and happy. And, but I didn't tell him we had left until we were on the train. And me still with the intention of, I still had the intention of going back at that time, but it was because of his responses and how he handled the situation made it extremely unsafe for me to go back. And then he had, began filing a bunch of like bogus, like emergency petitions that I had kidnapped our daughter, all these things, and took me to court, but also had gotten rid of all of my things, almost as if I didn't exist, and then renewed our lease without my name on it. So I really had nowhere to go at that point. So I didn't really have a home to come home to. So, but because of all of the court stipulations with relocation, and we had a custody order in place at that time that we had to stay in Philly until the custody hearing, which was almost 2 months away. And so that was that point, like that period of time where we were, homeless, and eventually got into a shelter. But yeah.
Wow, what an admirable decision to take the leap, believe in yourself. Were you fighting at that time? Were you still an MMA fighter, or was this after that, before that? What was the timeline there?
I actually was fighting. I was already on that trajectory when we met. That's actually how we met, was at a MMA gym, and I put myself on the back burner for many years throughout my whole relationship, because just life revolved around him and his goals and what he wanted to do. So, but that was always, like I said before, just I always knew I was meant for more. I always had something inside me, and I knew it was there, and always hoped I could go back to it. And but yeah, and I always tell people also that it's leaving these types of relationships, leaving an abusive relationship, when you're that far in, you have children, it is a scary thing. It's not, a decision that's an easy one. And people often say, well, why does she stay? There's a lot of reasons why somebody might stay in an abusive relationship. Because for someone like me, I had, for one, terrified, because when you leave, it's the most dangerous time. Like statistically, like women are 70 times more likely to be killed. And this is for first 2 weeks of leaving than any other time in the relationship. And so a lot of it is, fear of getting hurt, of them hurting your family. But I always say, sorry, that's a little long-winded, but all that to say that to give others hope that it's always worth it when you choose yourself. For me, I was willing to lose everything to gain everything and more. So that's always kind of how I looked at it, and how I try to inspire hope in that as well. So
I really like that answer, and you weren't afraid to just start over.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to other women that are maybe in an abusive relationship as to how to explore the fear, the uncertainty, the doubt, maybe the financial distress, especially if there's children or there's mutual belongings, whether that's real estate or whatever, that may be keeping the couple entangled a little bit longer than they would actually really like?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because all situations are so different, and I find that a lot of us women, we feel guilty. We feel guilty when we start having these feelings of like leaving, because you try so hard and you're so invested to keep the relationship together, to keep trying to be this, reach these unrealistic expectations, or to be the perfect partner for them, and it's never enough. And then you start to feel like it's your fault, like you're the bad one, or, for having these thoughts, or even wanting to leave to break up the family. But I should, like I said, always choose yourself. Like, always choose yourself, always bet on yourself, because you can't go wrong. You cannot go wrong with that. And we as women, we have an intuition. We know when something's not right, or when something is right. And so I just always tell people to trust their intuition, and then just to start educating yourself. You don't have to make this, huge decision right away at one time. I think it's really important to just really try to sit with yourself and think about what makes you happy. You're not selfish for thinking that, for what's best for you and for your children. I know that sometimes even the thought of leaving is just, it's just like a mountain that you have to overcome. And then there's like another mountain. It's never just, oh, you leave and everything's fine and it's sunshine and rainbows. It's never like that. Like once you leave, that's the first step. And like the real battle is everything after that, because oftentimes we're stalked, we're harassed. They break into your house. They will, it's a very dangerous situation. So you're dealing with that on top of maybe custody issues, on top of just trying to keep it together for your kids, on top of, maybe trying to find a job. Like there's so many other things that people don't think about when somebody leaves an abusive relationship. So like I said, educate yourself, do your homework, maybe come up with a safety plan. Just start kind of getting used to the idea. Maybe keeping a journal, keeping a diary, and like kind of giving yourself an outlet. That was something that was really helpful to me. I actually have 3 journals that I kept throughout my entire ordeal, just not really knowing if I was, to be honest, my intent behind that initially, before I realized it was like therapeutic, was because I thought something was going to happen to me, and I wanted people to know like the real story. I'm sorry. If something happened to me, that they would know, that my daughter would know. But yeah, every day I documented everything. And so yeah, but then it just became like, it was also therapy. So I kind of like, it was like a double benefit there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely writing fills the gaps within our thinking and gives us an outlet. And I'm so appreciative of you sharing. I really do believe what I said at the onset of our podcast, that the hardest fights aren't in the cage. They're not the ones that when you're fighting somebody else and there's, tools that you've accessed over the course of time. Sometimes the hardest battles are the ones you face when absolutely nobody is watching. When you're putting that pen to paper and you're brain dumping your experience with the psychological fear of like, wow, like if I do get harmed and I'm not around, like I want my family and my daughter and those closest to me to have the true story, so that hopefully this motivates and inspires the next generation to not endure something like this, or to have additional tools to be able to find outlets or support systems to escape those challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, I always encourage finding, programs, obviously like therapy, leaning into every resource available. But I also don't forget to like lean into yourself, like go inside, do the inner work. And because I find that through a lot of this work I have been doing, like as an advocate and as a mentor as well, it's like we lean so much into resources and programs that once those run out, like I feel if you don't do the inner work, you're still kind of like left with all of this heaviness, and you're still carrying around all these things that you haven't quite really dealt with. So I always encourage people to also make sure that, while you're, taking advantage of resources and in these programs, which, like I said, all are great, but lean into yourself as well. Yeah.
Free is the way to be. Life beats us up a bit and causes some bumps and bruises, but that doesn't mean we have to stay on the sidelines. This is why we've partnered with Kinyan Labs. Get back to doing what you love with this incredible portable device designed to get you back in the game. Kinyan is on a mission to move people from pain to possible with their top-rated red light therapy and laser solution, which tackles inflammation along with muscle and joint pain quickly and effectively. What I love is that it's portable and rechargeable, making it easy to actually incorporate into my everyday life consistently. It's small and lightweight, so you can throw it in your gym bag or work bag, or even an overnighter. Kinyan's lasers and LED combo make this cutting-edge device extremely versatile for use with general aches and pains, as well as chronic back pain, arthritis, post-surgery recovery, endometriosis, and more. This has been an amazing tool keeping my elbows and knees pain-free for pressing, pulling, and squatting in the gym. Great tools like the Move Plus give me the freedom and flexibility to continue living life on my terms without limitations. There are a lot of reasons why over 15,000 people are using this device and rating it 4.7 stars and above. Head on over to kinyan.io and use code ALLSMITH at checkout to begin your pain-free journey. For sure. One of the beauties of therapy and coaching is the cognitive side of things, which is the goal of both of those things is to not be as reliant on the coach or the therapist. It's to develop the resilience and the tools and the discipline to do the assignments, to do the work consistently. And what's challenging about that is that there's an immediate response when you're hitting a bag, you're hitting mitts, or you're sparring, or you're doing a workout in the gym. You're doing an actionable that that can be measured, that you can feel, that maybe is documented on a smartwatch or an Oura Ring or something like that. Sometimes the work that we do in the dark, as far as journaling or as far as meditation or using sound therapy or healing techniques, it's difficult to quantify. So then intrinsically you're like, I feel better, I feel lighter, but how do we measure this? And I think it takes a little bit of time to create that level of buy-in for a stubborn high performer to then be like, oh, this is working. When I'm doing this, my energy is better. All of these other things are improving as a byproduct of that work that I'm doing in the dark. But sometimes it is difficult to create consistent habits around it because it's not always like a tangible measurement that you can physically see.
Sure. I agree with that 100%. And what's funny is a lot of the things that I was doing just because it made me feel better in those times, like once we got into the safe haven. So we ended up, the organization that I work with now is the same organization that saved my life, that took us in. We operate 2 emergency safe havens in Philadelphia, and we lived at one of them for 4 months, and just all the things that I was doing helped shape me to this person you see today, with just the discipline, being extremely just self-aware and accountable for what I do every single day. I was just, like I said, the things I was doing were just things that made me feel better and things I could control. And it helped me to be okay with, okay, I can't control this and I can only do one thing at a time. And then I can only do what I can do. So I had like a way of like compartmentalizing a lot of these things. But when it came to like the journaling, that made me feel better. So then that was sort of like, okay, I'm going to do this every day. That was like kind of building on that accountability. And then while we were in the safe haven, I started training again. So that's what makes my story so unique, was because I learned the transformative like power and the healing that came along with like the accountability of getting up and going to the gym, just stepping onto the mat and training and showing up every day, even when I didn't want to. But I realized it got me out of bed. So then I'm like, okay, well, this also makes me feel better. So like all these things, I think that just sort of innately kind of started happening was because I was just taking those like little steps. All those little things, like what you're saying, I was doing in the dark, were like helping me to like really battle through all these things, like both on and off the mats, you know? So, cause on the mats, you know, I have to, you know, of course you have my training partners and sparring partners, but it was really just like a battle with myself and pushing myself as hard as I can go. And like, you know, you don't give up, you know, you made it this far. Okay, what's 30 more seconds? You just keep pushing and facing yourself and you improve. And then you start seeing the life come back in you. And it really just gave me the strength and everything I needed to, you know, push through in all areas. And so, not to get ahead of myself, because I know we'll talk more about that, but yeah, just all those like little things like helped me to become like that disciplined, you know, disciplined and really just finding my confidence to walk through life again. So
people don't realize that the only goal when you're in huge traumatic experiences like that is wake up in the morning.
Yeah, take a shower.
Take a shower. Like you got to get those little mini wins, make your bed, do your laundry, like things that like are seemingly basic activities of daily living, but you've got to accumulate the micro wins to then develop the momentum to keep pressing forward.
Yeah.
It also creates psychological organization, because traumatic experiences, typically you've got 100 tabs open at once. And you use the word compartmentalize. It's really difficult to do that on occasion because you're just tab, and you have so many things to worry about, especially in being a mom, because you're not just thinking about you. You're thinking about her. You're thinking about how your decisions are impacting her. And the thing that's interesting is, going back to that original comment around just wake up in the morning, your bed is safe. it's not always safe going out into the world. You don't know if you're going to have an interaction with him or with somebody else. And making it to the gym is a monumental victory, because now you're going to a place that I think became safe for you because you saw the development and you saw who you became as a process of showing up. But I would assume that early on, it was probably very difficult to make that a habit when you kind of just want to hide from the world. Nobody really understands what's going on in between your ears. And you're just trying to show up as a mother and figure out this next chapter when all of your security and familiarity was flushed down the toilet.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all of that. But that was my driving force. Like when you say, thinking about my daughter, being a mom, it was, for me, as much as it was, okay, I guess that comes back to like the compartmentalizing, because of course, I was doing the work, the inner work, doing what I needed to do because I wanted to be a better mom for her. I didn't want any of this to land on her. And she was already dealing with enough herself, like being caught in the middle and having her own, not so great experiences as well with her dad. But like, all that to say is like, yeah, like anytime I felt that, like, God, okay, I don't feel like getting up. Like, this is going to suck. And then I'm like, okay, wait, Selena, okay. Like, she needs me today. Like, if I can make it to this workout, I'm going to feel better. And like, it's going to be, it's going to pour into her. So a lot of my driving force had everything to do with her, whether it was like, training and fighting. It got me out of bed to an extent, but, she was really my purpose in all of it. And she deserves that. So that's kind of how I looked at it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Becoming a parent didn't just save you. It gave you a reason to fight for something bigger than yourself.
100%. 100%.
Like that in and of itself really, really is cool, because it's even though it is about you, you made it not about you, which gave you this inner fire that unlocked reservoirs of potential that you just kind of diffused into the world, that served as like a catalyst to rebuild not just your life and your experience, but to build up your daughter. And I'm a huge fan that a rising tide lifts all boats. And so as you continued to rise, like so did she. So what was that experience like when you kind of got through the fogginess of the fear, of the nastiness of stepping away from something that seemingly was familiar, but you knew wasn't the right fit for you? Mm-hmm. When did you start to experience a little bit of success and joy where you're like, whoa, I'm on the right path? Like, I know it's going to take a little bit more climbing of the mountain, but I am starting to optimistically believe that there is light at the end of the tunnel.
Sure. It's a great question, actually. I feel like I felt it early on, believe it or not, even though I was still dealing with like all of the things. When I shifted the focus onto myself and my daughter, like it became less about, yes, I had to deal with him, but it wasn't about what he did to us. It wasn't about like, him putting us in this situation. Like I shifted the focus onto me and who do I need to become? Like, who do I need to be to like reach that, vision of like who I see myself as later and like what I want my life to look like. So it really just became like a campaign, like this like daily like campaign and like going to war for myself and like just kind of like, okay, now I'm like dealing with this guy, like whatever. And the countless court hearings, like that was like also a whole other like battle in of itself, like years of him dragging us through court. But yeah, I think it was, I can't think of like a particular moment, but maybe a time when, I can think of what it was. We were actually still in a safe haven, still dealing, but I was in such a good place where I had this sort of like realization that I wanted to give back. And then I knew like at that point, like how do I describe it? How do I describe this? okay. So basically, when I was training, all the things, there was a part of me that felt like a little bit guilty because I was leaving the safe haven, getting all of this like amazing, you know, results and things from training, beyond the mats, being around my teammates. It's like, you know, my family, and going back to the safe haven where nobody else had what I had. Like a lot of those women, I mean, most of us go in without family, go with like, you know, with no belongings, nothing, and rebuilding from nothing. They don't have that. They didn't have a team. They didn't have people lifting and building them up and believing in them and telling them like, oh, you can do this. And then you start seeing that come to fruition. Like they didn't have that. So I had this thought. It was a phone call with my mom one evening, and I said, I think I would love to have a program here. I would love to see that happen, like here at the Safe Haven. I was like, you know, I would love to like come back and maybe do something like that. And my mom was like, let's think about getting you out of there first. Then you can think about it. Like you still have a lot of work to do before you can help other people. But I think it was that point for me of having just even that thought process of like wanting to help other people made me realize like, okay, like I'm in a good place now to like, I think to feel that confident to want to like help other women in my shoes to sort of maybe just give them some sense of, you know, the confidence, the self-esteem, just because like I said, I know what that does. Like being in there when you're homeless, you feel like you feel like complete failure, like you're defeated, you have nothing, you have your children, and yeah, I wanted to give that back. I wanted to just give them something good, and that's something that they could carry with them. And I ended up doing that actually once we transitioned out. But yeah, I think that was probably that moment for me. I could probably think of like so many others, but for me, that was a big one for sure.
Man, I can feel almost like being there, observing, kind of seeing what you went through. And I feel like there's two types of people. The first one is the rest of their life becomes, this is what happened to me. And it's not even to the fault of their own. They don't have the resources. Maybe they have the challenging upbringing. They don't have the family support or access to certain things, or maybe they're just in so much pain that they don't necessarily even have the internal discipline or the drive or the people motivating and inspiring them to take that first step. And sometimes, you know, I always say you can spiral down, but you can also spiral up. It's very difficult to spiral up when you're just in that much pain. Pain changes you for sure. But then the other side of the coin, there's the people that share the story over the course of time, which is, this happened to me and here's what I did with it. Here's how I turned that pain into something that could really be an advocate for other people that maybe will experience this in the future, because typically history repeats itself. This is not the first time we're going to see an emotionally abusive relationship that creates challenges. But at the very least, providing tools and a story where people don't feel alone, and then they can take a similar step in the right direction, similar to what you did. And I'll summarize that with, your past doesn't define you, it refines you. The strength you gain can be the voice that changes lives.
I believe that 100%. And that's something that I preach a lot about when I do share my story, is that, you know, it doesn't have to define you. It's just, I mean, our trauma will always be part of us, but I feel we always find ways, like as long as you keep doing the inner work and recognizing, you know, your triggers and how you can better, you know, manage and just be more self-aware. It's like the work never stops. You know, even when you get to a good spot, I'm in a great spot, but I still have to do the inner work. I still have to work on myself and stay aware and, you know, to make sure I stay level-headed. You know, there's a lot of things that we still deal with, like PTSD and, you know, the nightmares and paranoia, like all these things. And it's very real, but it's, you know, important to, just always maintain, like, focus on yourself. Yes, it's happened to you, but it's not your fault, but it is your responsibility to move forward in life, how you want to move forward. Yeah.
For sure. I like that level of discipline. I like that line. It's your responsibility to move forward in life. It's not always easy.
No.
The other thing that's important to note is it's not linear, right? Like you don't just like get to a good spot where you leave the safe haven, you start your advocacy program, you start speaking, you start training and coaching, and now you're in pursuit of making your own gym or creating your own gym. But what comes to mind now is those things still creep in. Grief, fear, trauma, pain, they don't just go away forever. And the analogy that I think about is like your container just gets bigger because you have now access to a bigger toolbox that can help you explore and navigate some of those feelings that come in rather than them paralyzing you. And then there's also that the consideration of the nervous system. You have fight, flight, and freeze. And I think for a lot of the women maybe in the safe haven, they're probably experiencing a level of freeze. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to create that first step in momentum. How do you kind of help get people out of that freeze state where they do start developing the confidence? You know, is it little things like just getting natural sunlight? Is it a food conversation? Is it a movement conversation? Now that you are such a leader and advocate in that space, where do you start that journey with them? Is it listening? Is it then providing, you know, tools, or is it just holding space?
Yeah, it's all of it, actually. It is holding space, kind of just meeting them where they're at, I find has been the best thing you can do for someone. Meeting them where they're at and just little things at a time. And then over time, they start to find that confidence again. And I find that so there's different levels. So like when somebody's like, for instance, maybe we have a client that's in the safe haven, right? And they've lost everything. They're there with their kids. Like, where do I even begin? A lot of it is just, like you said, holding space and just kind of like literally holding their hand through the process, making sure that they know, like, have an action plan in place. Sometimes that can be the most powerful, because like even when you have the resources and things, it's, you know, you also have to remember nobody's coming to save you. Nobody's going to come make you write your list or say, you know, oh, you know, you have to get up and take a shower. Like all these little things you have to literally force yourself to do. Force yourself. And then the more you do it, like it just becomes part of your routine, and then you start adding more things to your routine. But I find that just, you know, supporting them through those action plans has been extremely beneficial. And then you start seeing people, you know, open up, like I said, finding their confidence, and then they want to, like, you know, incorporate some self-defense and working out, and then they start feeling better. And it's just, it's like a flower. They start to grow and blossom, and they learn, and then you see it through their kids as well, and their kids are happy. And it's definitely a beautiful process. It's hard because as an advocate, we take in a lot, right? We take in a lot of other people's, you know, emotions and traumas, and it can get heavy for us at times as well. But it's always worth it. You know, it's temporary, but once you see the result of somebody who can find their way back to themselves again by the end of it, is a really beautiful thing. So.
The way you painted that picture is freaking awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
and what's so cool is just that, like, a habit missed once, it's not a big deal. A habit missed twice becomes the new habit. And it sounds to me that you're practicing the art of co-piloting people's journeys, reminding them that they're not alone, whether that's holding space, holding their hand, giving them a hug, just sitting with them, and not necessarily being like a judgmental fixer, but just reminding them that you're there. And then when they're ready, also reminding them that, like, hey, if and when you're ready, I'm happy to give you a nudge, or I'm happy to shift your lenses a little bit. I'm happy to share some resources. But I think asking that permission, like, hey, are you ready to receive this? May I share advice? And realizing that that's not always going to land. And I think sometimes in the healing process, people jump into that too soon. They're like, let me just fix you. You're going to be better in no time. It's like, that's not really how this works.
No, because they need, like, autonomy. They need to have like a sense of power over their own lives. And like
Mm-hmm.
you said, just kind of being a co-piloting them through that. I find that that's just, yeah, you can't, as much as I'm not going to lie, there's times where I want to just be like, tell someone, because you see the potential, you see it in them, and they know it's there, but you just have to remind them of their own power and just like, it'll come out eventually. But yeah, it's so hard because sometimes you want to be like, sometimes you just want to tell somebody, maybe like shake them and
Mm-hmm.
say, yeah, like you're still in there. You're still alive. Like let's live.
Something I
Yeah.
love to explore in some of these deep, meaningful conversations is, what is this trying to teach me? Right? And that goes on both
Mhm.
sides of the coin, right? Like if you're wanting to shake them and fix because you can kind of foresee where they're going to go, because you're like, I've been down this road before. Let me
Mhm.
just like keep you away from all the difficulty that you're going to experience. Let's just like pass through that in order just to get to the place that I know you can get.
Mhm.
We as humans are like very outcome oriented. But I
Yes.
think sometimes it's teaching even the healer or the advocate or the coach, hey, you have to be patient. And when you're trying
Yeah.
to learn patience, God, spirit, whoever, people believe in, you don't just learn patience because you decided,
Mhm.
hey, I'm going to get patient today. You
Yeah.
have to go through the trials and tribulations that are
Mhm.
refining that
Sure.
characteristic and that quality.
Mm.
And that's very difficult sometimes because
It's
they're
so
impatient,
hard.
want to heal faster. You're
Mhm.
impatient, want to get them to the destination and living their life and out of the
Right.
safe haven. And so it becomes this art of just like be in the moment, take it one thing at a time. And then before you know it, like you look over your shoulder and you're like, oh wow, we traveled pretty far. It just didn't
Yeah.
feel like it
Yeah.
in the midst of going through the journey.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely I certainly learn a lot about myself in that process. Absolutely. But yeah, I mean, it shapes us because I know that it's sort of like you're not, they say you're not supposed to say this, like when you're a coach or like, personal training or stuff, that you're never supposed to say like, oh, I want to train them like I would train myself or like how I wish, but I feel like you kind of have to, because I feel like a lot of the clients that I work with, I see a lot of myself in them, and I've lived through it. I have that lived experience.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of things that I know that I can see that they can't see yet. So it's just a lot of trusting that process as well. But at the same time, it's in the moments it's hard to say like, oh, this is going to shape you, or trust the process. It's hard, but we're all learning, right? We're all learning together. We're growing together. And it's still shaping me. The work I do today still shapes me. And yeah,
What are your
pretty
what are
cool
your
stuff.
thoughts
Yeah.
on the phrase, I understand, I get it? Because it's easy to say that, like you have traveled something similar to them, but
Mhm.
everybody's story is uniquely theirs. And so a part of me believes that that line is a little bit insensitive, but then the other
Mhm.
part of me is like, when taken with a grain of salt, absolutely makes
Sure.
sense.
Yeah.
And so it definitely has this caveat of like, how does something like that land? Because a lot of people in their attempt to help, you're like, oh, I understand, I get it. I of all people, have
Mhm.
been through this before.
Oh,
But
yeah.
you're
Oh,
not
I
in
would.
it in that moment. So you can't really
Right.
feel it the way they can feel it.
Yeah. I would never say that to a client.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's a tone and certain things that we I mean, you can kind of say whatever you want, but we try to be more sensitive in our speech and the things that we're saying, depending on where they're at in their journey.
Mm-hmm.
So I might have a client who's an incredible place in their healing journey and they're confident, like they've been able to, maybe transition out of a shelter or and find their own place and they've got a job and all these things. And you sort of create a relationship where there's certain things, like when you can say stuff like that and that it would land with them. Someone who is maybe still in that traumatic experience and kind of like in that recovery process, I definitely wouldn't say that too. So it's all just levels and situational depending on the situation. But to say like I said, someone who's a bit further on in their healing journey and they kind of like develop a relationship and sometimes friendships, where I feel like it lands with them, at that stage.
Do you help train kind of other advocates now that maybe are wanting to give back as well, and kind of help teach them appropriate language, help them understand tone, space, when to use physical touch, when to stay away? Like how do you help educate, inspire those people to have some of the intangibles that you have that make you such a great healer and advocate?
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, it's part of, so to go back to what I do with the organization. So I work with Women Against Abuse, which is the nonprofit that, like I said before, had saved our lives. And we are one of the largest domestic violence agencies in the country. We offer everything from free legal services. We operate 2 emergency safe havens. We have a 24/7 hotline, programs, laundry list of resources, childcare, all the things that someone might need to rebuild their lives through their, an abusive situation. So with that being said, I began advocating around 8 years ago, and then 2 years ago, I was elected onto the board, which made me the first ever former client in the history of the organization, which they've been operating for 40 years. And so that was an amazing accomplishment. But with that, I'm also on, a couple of our committees, like the fundraising committee and programs committee as well. And I also facilitate trainings for new employees, staff, and advocates as well. So it's a quarterly training that we do. A lot of it is just kind of like a conversation we're having now, and I can answer questions, I share my story, and essentially I come in at the end and go over a lot of all the things that they studied within their training. And so, but a lot of it is that, and I think we would like to incorporate more support for our advocates as far as training of like what you're saying, because I think it's really, really, really important. A lot of times we do come across situations with staff where they don't have that proper training, and I've had clients reach out to me directly and have complaints about it. So it's something that I'm trying to sort of implement within the organization currently. So unless it's like a one-off or during one of our classes, we unfortunately don't have something like that set in place as of yet. So hopefully that'll come soon.
For sure. What keeps most women staying in the abusive relationship?
There's a lot of factors, right? It could be, lack of income and support, fear that they could get hurt, or oftentimes abusers will threaten to hurt, family or children if they try to leave. A lot of it is the cycle of abuse, where you might experience abuse and that's followed up with, the love bombing, the honeymoon phase, the apologies, the gifts they're treating you, they're showing you the person that you fell in love with. They're showing you like that person could still be in there, and then the cycle repeats itself. You might have like a period where things are okay, and you're like thinking, okay, like things are changing, and then the abuse happens again. And I find that when someone is so brainwashed, especially if you're in it for years, like I was with my ex for 6.5 years, and you just become so brainwashed. You don't really realize you're in a cycle of abuse. You just, try to keep your family together and, try to management. I mean, there's a lot of different reasons, right? But it's, I mean, I can speak for myself and for some others too, but I just feel like it's, you feel like it's your fault. And because you feel like it's your fault, you're going to just try to be this perfect person and try to keep it together and keep apologizing and make excuses and justify the behavior. And, maybe I made them do that. Maybe I made them, hit me, or whatever the case may be. And yeah, it's just, the list goes on.
Mm-hmm. You don't grow by avoiding the storms. You grow by learning to dance in the rain.
Yeah.
Right? Like you
Yeah.
eventually got to the point where you did start dancing. You started dancing in the ring. You started doing jujitsu. You started really learning and finding your way as far as protection and defending yourself and self-defense. Where did that journey begin, and how did you really take it to the next level where you became this very successful fighter?
Yeah. Are you asking when my martial arts journey began, or when did I begin to kind of, I guess,
I feel like you
redefine
probably
myself
did
through
it
that?
from before the relationship and probably through it.
Yeah.
But then on the other side, there was this other level that you were able to access because it was less about you. It was more about your daughter and who you were becoming, like you mentioned. But what did that training look like, and how were you able to like turn the dial to get yourself to another level?
Honestly, that's a good question. I just always showed up. I showed up every single day and just worked really, really hard. I don't think there was a point for me where it was like this leveling up. I think you level up as you just show up every day and you keep training. Like the improvement comes. And as long as you're working hard and just for me, it's hard to say. I mean, when I was at the safe haven, I was 90 pounds and stepped on the mat again. And nobody knew what I was going through at the time. I was just like, because I wanted it to be about me and what I wanted to accomplish in the gym. I was able to like keep the both separate. Nobody knew what was behind that for me. People knew about my ex because he was also in the fighting community. Obviously, he was a well-known fighter, fought in the UFC. So he was very well known. People knew we had broken up, but didn't know that we were homeless or living in a shelter. And so, and I didn't want people to feel sorry for me. That was a whole other thing I did. I wasn't a victim, and I didn't want to like fall into this like victim mode mentality. And so, yeah, just me showing up. And then at the time I was working under Daniel Gracie, and he asked me one day, like, do you want to fight? Is this really what you want to do? And I said, yes. And he said, okay, you're going to have to turn on your fuck you switch. That's what he said to me. And you can't give a fuck. You just have to keep showing up. You have to work hard, like fuck everything that's going on outside the gym. And you just focus. If you want to fight, then, we'll get you there. And so, yeah, that's what I did. That's it. And then once we transitioned out of the shelter, had, gotten back on my feet, got a job, I got my own place. And about a year after we transitioned, I won a world title with King of the Cage. But actually before that, I was supposed to fight on it was like this, women's tournament for XFC in Brazil, but it kept falling through. Like I couldn't get anything to stick, and I remember at the time I was getting a little frustrated because I was ready. I was ready, looking for a fight, and then King of the Cage called, and they were looking for replacement fights for their champion. At the time, I was 1-0. Nobody knew who I was. She was #1 prospect in California at the time, on the cusp of the UFC, and just looked like a freaking bulldog. Like, she was like tough, right? And I know that, a good coach will always say, like, you want to make sure that you get the, what they like. Our coaches want to see us fight the best, right? We want to be the best in the world. We want to like be challenged in that way, but also it was like, are you sure you want this to be your first fight back? And like, I didn't care. That was my switch,
The fuck you switch had been flipped.
I was like, listen, you did this. Like, you asked for this. So yeah, I was like, yeah, let's do it. So, and actually my coach had other obligations, so he couldn't come with me to that fight. It was myself and my teammate. I was like, fuck it, we're going. So we flew to California. Everybody was like, who is this girl? Like, and, but I knew what was in me. and what I was ready to unleash. And I should backtrack a little bit. It was actually kind of a cool moment. So my very first coach, when I found martial arts, when I found martial arts when I was 19. My very first coach, he was former Muay Thai champion, like fought all through like Europe and Asia. A little bit of a crazy, interesting person. But he had moved to Malibu. We lost touch. We stayed connected, but we sort of had this reunion at that fight. I hadn't seen him in quite a few years, and he agreed to come be my second corner, and it was kind of a cool experience. Full circle moment to have him there. But yeah, I remember just feeling so calm and happy to be there and so excited. I mean, thousands of people at Citizens Bank Arena in Ontario, California, and I remember feeling just really happy and like, all right, like it was like that feeling of coming home, and ended up knocking her out in the fourth round, like knocked out cold, you know. So that was pretty incredible. But it was just like everything just came out. I don't know, like I was expecting to win. I just didn't know, like, I didn't think that was going to be the outcome. But I remember at one point in that fourth, things just kind of, I went into like tunnel vision, and everything was kind of slow motion. And I was aware of the mistakes that she was making. So I was just ready to capitalize and, you know, hope for that knockout, but I wasn't sure. And I had a conversation with myself. Like, if you don't, like, you have to do something, because the fight was too close that if it went to decision, they would have given it to her, because, you know, you really have to beat the champion, right? You can't just, like, unless it's a obvious decision. But yeah, it was close. And so I was like saying to myself, you got to do something. You got to do something if you want this. And that was like when that knockout.
What's so crazy is like when you watch Rocky, like the highlight reel, or you hop on Instagram, the highlight reel, or even your documentary, it's 4 minutes, right? It's pretty cool that it can be shortened, because it wasn't 4 minutes for you. The lead up to that fight is not 4 minutes. It's not the highlight reel that lands as the panorama view inside the headspace of the consumer. And the fact that you were able to regulate your physiology, manage your emotions, and all of the difficulty, thinking of your daughter, the difficulties with your family, being homeless, navigating the things with the legal battle, so much out of your control, and just becoming married to consistency and showing up and just trying your best to realize, like, you know what, like, it's not about intensity 3 days a week and feeling great, because 3 out of 7 is not a great percentage. It's 6 or 7 out of 7 at maybe 70 to 80%, but your psychological focus is present there. And for it to all come full circle, it just goes to show that, like, some of the most silent battles that we can't see just really do lead to this optimal flow state when everything comes together in the right time, and there is this intrinsic belief. And I just think it's so cool that you got the experience to have that knockout moment based on everything else that's not necessarily shown in the highlight reel.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it was a very powerful moment, and more of like really realizing like who I was and the power that I did possess and what I was capable of. It's easy to say, especially once you're on the other side and you're doing pretty good. Like, you know, like I said, working, training, like I had aside from like the legal issues and like dealing with the annoyances of like him trying to stalk and harass me, for the most part, I was back to like a normalish life, which was nice. So it's easy to, you know, have those thoughts, but like once, to like have that knockout moment, that for me was like, I'm like truly, like that was like true freedom for me, because I didn't let him, I think I had in me of like, I was just so sick of him taking everything from me. That was still part of, believe it or not, my motivation was to just prove him wrong on all fronts. Because throughout our whole relationship, like, you know, you don't have an education. Like, how can you provide? I mean, this is when we were like still together. Like, he was just always down on me, like just shit talking, like, well, you don't have an education, like you're not smart enough. Or he would weaponize like religion against me, or he would say, always made fun of like something about my looks and my weight. It was just, it was always like something, or that I could, things that I didn't have and things I couldn't have or would never have. And that like, oh, you can never do that without me, or like, you know, things he always take credit for, try to take credit for. So I was just, yeah, part of that was just the, not really like angry, but just kind of like pissed off, like, how do I can't describe it that well, but I was like pissed off in a way that where it wasn't like he wasn't like impacting me in a negative way anymore. It was like pissed off, like yeah, I'm going to show you. This is my life. Like, you have no say. I'm going to go do this, and it's mine, and you don't get to take credit for it. So fuck you. That's how I felt. Yeah.
The Trident family taught me something really important this last year, that we are all a bundle of stories, both good, bad, and everything in between. All of their cold brews remind their customers that they are part of something bigger than themselves. I start my day with the Sweet Cream Cold Brew as I am prepping my mind and body for fitness, service, coaching, and podcasting. With various locations in San Diego, they offer over 14 nitro cold brews and a variety of specialty drinks. You can find the perfect brew and pair it with one of their treats from the Keto Bakery. You can check them out over at tridentcoffee.com and use code ALLSMITH to take your coffee experience to the next level. It's a level of freedom that is so cool to hear. I want to note too that, like, I don't know that education is always as important as people think it is. Right? Yeah. Like there's so many different forms of education. There's experience, there's the school of hard knocks, there's living on the street, there's observation, there's learning from other people's mistakes, there's reading, there's YouTube videos. There's so many different forms where it doesn't have to be this formal thing that grants you a piece of paper that says that you're qualified to be a thinker. I think everybody has a loose form of education in some capacity. And in some ways, what you learn in school might brainwash you a little bit. You're not always seeing the whole picture. You're seeing what they're telling you to think, so that you can then take an exam and get a score or a grade, which then validates you to get that piece of paper that, you know, on your resume or LinkedIn profile says that you're qualified. But you also have other forms of education that might actually make you more valuable because you're a critical thinker that had to survive. Survival instinct is fucking very important in this world, especially in the ever-changing political landscape, the job market, inflation. There's so many different angles. And our world is not the same as it was even 5 years ago with the development of technology and AI. Like, education should be a continuous thing. And I don't know, it's just an interesting little rant that I wanted to go on, because I think that argument or that criticism is slightly invalid.
No, absolutely. And I feel so much of that now. Like, when it comes to education, obviously through my experiences, I want my daughter to feel less pressured in her life, because, by the way, she's thriving. Like, she's amazing. She goes to performing arts school. She's, you know, plays sports. Has a ton of friends. Like, she's just like living her best life. She's a really happy kid and doesn't give me any problems. Like, she's my best friend. And I try to encourage her to, you know, have life experiences. Yes, education is important. And yes, it's important to know what you want to do in life, but not right now. You don't have to know everything. And I feel like, I mean, she goes to a great school, but I think all schools kind of like pressure these kids of like, you gotta like know what you want to do. And like, you're like, you know, you graduate, you go to college, you do blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I'm actually in a place now with her where I'm actually encouraging her to take some time off after high school and just go travel. I'm like, go to Italy, like I was like, just go travel, like see the world, like live life. And, I'm sure at some point, and that maybe you'll find what you want to do. If you don't, like, you come home, I don't know, like, but I just feel like you don't have to know right now, and you don't have to know even when you're a senior in high school. I want her to have life experiences, get to know herself, and just who she is in this world. Like, I don't want her
I really
to,
like that a lot.
yeah.
And the reason why I like that a lot is like the world puts this pressure on us to fit within the matrix of, like you said, go to the school, get the grades, go to college. After college, get the job that's associated with whatever degree you chose, even if it's not the field that you like. That's the knowledge you have, so that's what you have to do in order to make a living. I white out all of that. And I think most of us don't know what we don't know. We should explore, dream, and discover. I love what you said about taking part and enrolling yourself in the process of travel. You never know what other cultures might unlock in you. Like, we don't know the foods that we like until we try them. Right?
Exactly.
Like, you know, there might be a predetermined factor based on like what you ate as a mother when she was, you know, still developing inside of you. But like, there's also just, I got to taste the different flavors of life.
Yeah.
And I love that you give her that freedom and flexibility to create, and give her the paintbrush and let her paint the blank canvas that is her life. I think that's a really beautiful parenting style.
Yeah, thank you. And I find that through going through what we went through together, obviously we're like very bonded and very close. We have this like insane trust between the two of us, and very openness, like communication wise. She always comes to me first, which is what I want. And my job, I learned this pretty early on because I am a control freak. I can be anyway. And found that I was kind of being like that with her. And I think, but it was part of trying to protect her. But then I learned, like, I can't do that. Like, she's her own person. Once we started, like, really kind of butting heads, and, like, I was feeling that resistance. I'm like, but wait, okay, she's her own person. I have to let her be. Even as a kid, like, parents are, you don't know what's best for you. I know what's best for you. Like, sure, we, like, to an extent, know what's best for our children. We have to guide them and support them, keep them alive, like all the things. But I also realized, like, she is her own person, and I have to parent and like meet her where she's at, kind of like what we were talking about before, and just help guide her and to help her understand, okay, well, you know, there's consequences. Like, if you make a choice, this is, you know, A, B, C, D, like, here's your options, like, yes, whatever. But I feel like giving her the power of choice, and it could be the wrong one, and I know it's the wrong one, but that's the only way she's going to learn. And I'll be here for her every step of the way and support her. But I find that, at least for me and her, like, our relationship, that's what works best for us. And I see that in her. I see how she's so much more confident in who she is right now, even as a teenager. And these years suck. Like, teenagers are hard, and not like suck, like she's good, but it's like, it's hard because you're like still trying to figure it out, and you have hormones and all these things, and life is hard as a teenager. So I don't want to make it harder for her. For me, it's just, listen, I'm here. Let's talk about it. Let's find a solution, you know, and if you make a mistake.
It has to be the most painful thing as a mother. And the analogy that I'll give is like, how do you learn that a stove is hot? You have to let her touch it. And sometimes, you know, that's difficult. And it sounds to me that, like, you want her to learn through experience and make mistakes, but you're trying to control the severity of those mistakes so that it doesn't land her in the situation that you had. And so there's a twofold situation of, like, you want to keep a tight grip, but then you also need to loosen that grip. And the analogy that I make there is, like, if I go to pick up sand and my grip is super tight, I can't hold very much sand. But if I loosen that grip and I kind of cup it a little bit with open fingers, now I can hold a lot more sand. I can hold a lot more space. I can hold her in ways that, you know, allow her to feel seen, heard, understood, and safe, as opposed to you tight gripping her where she's just like, I can't communicate. I can't really do anything without being criticized. And the criticism is not coming from a negative place. It's coming from a place of protection. But that level of awareness is so important as a parent. It's cool that you've learned that about yourself, and then now you're upgrading your operating system as a mom to then make your relationship very special.
Yeah, for sure. You said that very beautifully. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Trying to echo what you're saying to like share kind of how it lands in my headspace.
No,
What's
that's
something
great.
about your journey that most people get wrong or misunderstood?
Honestly, I don't know. I don't think maybe early on, people thought I was sharing and doing all this work because I wanted attention. That like I'm, talking about my experiences, about abuse and living in a shelter, for attention. But I think that quickly, obviously, changed over time, and people really seeing me really doing this because I want to help other people and just give hope to the world. If I can help just one person by sharing my story, then I'm happy. So,
I like that answer.
now I don't really get a lot of, if people are saying anything negative, I wouldn't know about it. I don't focus at all on like, I honestly don't really care if somebody has something negative to say. And once in a while, I might get a little bit of like a negative feedback on like a comment or something on something. I'll hide the comment and I block them. Like I don't care enough to like let it marinate. I have way too much good in my life and things. I don't want to take up space with like one negative thing, or like if somebody has like a misconception about something, like they can just, keep following and you'll see. And I don't know. I learned that I can't really, focus on other people and like their misconceptions of me. I just, what I do from a good place, and it's meaningful, it's impactful. I help and save a lot of people every day. So I don't really.
It's an interesting journey for sure. I love that your healing journey allows you to draw boundaries, which is incredibly important and very difficult for a lot of the world. But the thing that stands out to me is so much of the world is in a place to support you when you first go through the traumatic experience. And then all of a sudden they kind of dissipate with this cognition of like, just get over it. Like your life goes on. And then there's that lonely chapter where you're like trying to make it, you're trying to figure out like how to give back based on your experiences and not be in the rut or the stuckness of the difficulty that you've been through. But that lonely chapter is tough. Not everybody gets out of that unless there's maybe a unique and vulnerable ability to ask for help, or somebody gives you a helping hand, or you take the action steps to then heal and grow and inspire. And then all of a sudden you get that knockout and your life changes forever. And then you're starting to give back. You create a job situation for yourself to be a support system and an advocate for other women that have gone through abuse. And now all of a sudden the support train is there. But nobody really conceptually understands or talks about the in-between, the chapter where nobody was really there, where you didn't even know what was going to come of this. You didn't know the opportunities you were going to get to fight. You didn't know exactly what was going to happen. And that's both like the beauty and the misery of the human experience. You don't know what you don't know, but if you just stick with it and you just practice the art of consistency, typically the energy of the world or the universe, whoever it is, rewards us somehow. And sometimes it's in ways that we can't even expect or anticipate.
Yeah, that was really powerful what you said. 'Cause you're right. A lot of people don't think about those in between chapters, and those were probably some of the loneliest times for me, where I needed, the support, and maybe just, I don't know, but I don't think I would change any of it though. I wouldn't change how any of it unfolded, because it led me here, and I feel just really proud and grateful to be in this position now. And it's been, a really incredible journey.
That's so cool. How did your identity shift when you decided to step out of the MMA world? And what surprised you about life after fighting, right? Like, I mean, I played professional sports. My transition after that was very difficult. It's your identity for a really long time. It's the questions. It's how people relate to you. It's how you get love and validation from the world. And then that ends, and the question becomes, who are you? What do you do now?
Yeah.
And you're like, I'm still me.
Yeah. But I think I kind of lost that with myself. Of like, I lost complete sense of self. I got really depressed. Like, it was a very hard transition. And I think in the beginning, I'm like, oh, I'll be fine, because you think like it's going to be, they don't tell you that it's sort of, I don't know. It was hard. Like, it was probably one of the toughest years I've had. And as far as like just the depression, anxiety, just the not knowing, or I just couldn't, I feel like there's been so many times in my life where at least I could see like the light at the end of the tunnel. Like, okay, well, if this doesn't work out, I could do this instead. Like, training and like fighting was all I knew. I'm like, well, sure, there's so many things within the sport that you can be involved with, but fighting is what I'm good at. You take that away, I'm like, what am I good at? I don't know what to do. And it was really, it was a tough transition. And plus being injured on top of it. And it wasn't my choice. So I was dealing with those aspects as well. I'll give you like a little bit of a backstory on that. So I've had 2 ACL surgeries, 2 ACL reconstructions, and then a meniscus repair, all on the same knee. The first one, re-injured it because I went back. I took a fight too soon. That was actually my first fight on Contender Series. I re-injured it, but I still won the fight. The last 20 seconds of the third with an arm bar and a torn ACL. And that put me back for a while, but my knee was never the same after that. And then got a little bit stronger that next year, fought again, had a great fight, won, then re-injured it again. I was like, man, I could feel it, and I knew retirement was probably on the horizon. Me being stubborn, I'm like, all right, this is how I'm planning my retirement. I'm going to fight one more time, and I just want to have good performance. I'm going to make sure I'm as healthy as I can going into it. And it just wasn't the case. I think just, God, the universe was like, I'm going to keep whispering. And so I have to just, hand you a completely blown out knee on a silver platter, and you'll never get to do the things you want to do if you don't listen. But I just wasn't taking the signs into consideration. I just kept pushing. And finally, I was actually cycling, cutting weight for a fight, had a perfect camp, weight cut was perfect, everything was perfect. I was a week out, cutting weight, and woke up the next day after cycling in a lot of pain with my knee, like couldn't walk. So I still went to my strength coach, and to our session, he's like, listen, you've put the work in, go recover, see how you feel tomorrow. And we'll start thinking of if we need to make a decision to pull out. Next day, could barely walk. And I was just like sobbing. I'm like, okay, because I knew it was going to be it for me, especially if I had to go into another surgery if it was torn. But I'm thinking like, but nothing happened. All I did was ride a bike. Like, what could it be? So got the MRI, and it turns out that my meniscus was just kind of hanging on by a thread. And it was just like overuse of my meniscus. And so ended up pulling out of the fight, just completely devastated. And, but still wasn't done. I was like, okay, I'll get stem cells, I'll recover, and then I'll have a boxing match, and then I'll be done. And I was on the back end, did that. I got stem cells, married to PT. I was on the back end of my program, like 4 weeks, and jump into sparring because I felt so great. I'm like, I just want to move. Nothing crazy. End up getting kicked by my training partner, just out of reaction, like things happen. It wasn't intentional, but yeah, he kicked me right in my bad knee and sent me back to day one. And that was me. And at that point, I couldn't walk. Like, I couldn't bear any weight on my knee. I was like back in my surgical brace, and then had a very hard conversation with myself of like, okay, now I need to if I want to be able to just move my body, train, to just walk and go get ice cream with my kid without pain, to go play volleyball. So I started thinking, like, kind of taking it back to like my quality of life and the things that I just enjoy doing on a daily basis. And if I want to continue having a good quality of life, I needed to make, the decision to retire. So that it was hard for me because it wasn't by choice. It was, by choice, but because of an injury. And so at that point, it's like, all right, like, let's get well, and then let's just, keep training keep my body moving and feeling good. And then thought I wanted to jump into coaching and all of these things, and it just ended up I don't know what happened exactly, but I ended up getting depressed and didn't do anything at all for a while, and thought I wanted to open a gym at that time, but then just frozen in fear, thinking all the what ifs, and what if I can't? What if, are you good enough? Can you raise enough money? Like, I had a problem for every solution. Anybody who was telling me, like, everybody who believed in me, you got this, and I kept coming up with problems for everything that they were telling me. So that went on for a lot longer than I would have liked it to. But listen, I think somebody, actually, a good friend of mine, said it to me recently, that we were talking about these things, and I was like, he was like, you know what, it's time. It's been time, it's your time. And I was like, you're right, it's been a journey. He said, well, good timing is always now. And I'm thinking, like, that was really powerful for me, and I needed to hear that. Good timing is always now. So now we're here, we're doing it. I'm excited, and I have a hard time not getting down on myself. I'm kind of a perfectionist, and I can be hard on myself, where I'm like, why did I waste so much time? Because I was just ridden with self-doubt. I had no confidence. I just was telling myself I couldn't do it, knowing damn well I could. And here I am doing it. So I don't know.
You're flipping the fuck you switch in a different way now.
Back on. Yeah. The light is still there. Yes. So just taking a risk, taking the leap. And
I mean, here's the other side of that coin. You don't want to be 75 sitting on a park bench communicating with your daughter and telling her what you could have done. The pain of suffering or the pain of uncertainty is way better than the pain of regret. You're going for it, and you have the potential to make it a beautiful, wonderful gym experience that's going to be full of healing and camaraderie and community and compassion, and very difficult workouts and easier workouts and the peaks and valleys and everything that comes with fitness and lifestyle. But the alternative of that is, if you don't do it, or even if you did fail, you'd always regret not doing it. It's something that, even watching your body language and seeing your eyebrows perk and seeing how passionate you get, it's meant to happen. And there's no better time than now. And I'm so excited for you. And it's so cool to see how everything's come full circle. And as we wrap things up, I have one big question for you. If you could speak to the younger version of yourself at your lowest point, what would you say to her?
That's a great question. What would I say? Oh, geez. I don't know. I don't know if it's just one thing I could say. There's like more than one thing. I guess at my lowest point, I think it'll help me if I talk about it a little bit. So lowest point was when, actually, I was my daughter's age. I grew up in a very dysfunctional home and felt alone most of my childhood, even though I had a lot of friends and always in sports. From the outside looking in, I looked like I was a cool, happy kid, and I wasn't. Just dealt with a lot of stuff at home people didn't know about. And I never really shared this before, but my daughter's age, I was contemplating suicide. And I remember kind of like hanging out of because we lived in like an apartment building. We lived on the second floor. I was like kind of just like hanging over the window with the window open, as if I was gonna like kind of like let myself just fall head first. Yeah, at that point I would just probably tell her that she's loved and that she matters, and that and that she loved and that she matters. Yeah. That's what I would say.
It's wonderful how sometimes the simplest of words can pull us out of those dark places. And I'm so thankful for you sharing, and I'm so thankful that you're here now.
All right,
because you are a light in this world.
Thank you.
Your story is absolutely incredible. And something that comes to mind with where you've been and what you're embarking on with this new gym experience, is there something about the high-performing risk takers where you're always going to think that it's not going to work out, and we're going to think of every problem for every solution. But Jamie, it's always worked out. It's never not worked out. It hasn't worked out always in the ways that you wanted or that you expected, but here you are, sharing your story for people all over the world. And I don't know that you would have thought that this is where you were going to be when you were in it. And it's a very cool thing. You're always going to think it's not going to work out, but it always does.
It does. Especially when you take the risk, right? Yeah, it always works out. I have survived 100% of all the things I didn't think I was going to make it through. So we're good.
Totally.
I think we're doing pretty good.
For sure. Jamie, your story is a powerful reminder that no matter how tough the fight, the resilience, the love, and the purpose can always bring us through to the other side. I really appreciate you sharing your journey with us, from the cage to advocacy, from struggle to triumph, and showing us that it really means a lot to continue to stick with the fight for our life and for your daughter and the countless lives that you continue to inspire. Your message today really touched me, and it's of strength. It's of hope. It motivates and inspires me and all of our listeners around the world. And it's exactly what I look to highlight within this ALLSMITH experience. To everyone listening, take Jamie's words as a call to action. Whatever you're going through, keep fighting, keep pushing to rise above and turn adversity into a beautiful purpose. Jamie, I appreciate you so much. Where can people find you?
Thank you so much for having me. This was amazing. Right now, Instagram is kind of like my main form of communication. So my handle is @badmama. So it's BAD_MMA.
That's so cool. I love it. Bad Mama.
Bad Mama. Yeah.
So cool.
Thank you so much.
For those of you listening, until next time, keep forging strength, resilience, and a life worth thriving for. Stay on the hunt for who you've not yet become. Bye-bye, guys.